emerging cognitive environment. And what does that have to do with cloud? It has everything to do with cloud. Why? Because hybrid cloud is really the platform on which cognitive solutions are being built. And there's many reasons for that. Cloud gives you fantastic ability to vision capabilities, to be applied to cognitive solutions. You and I are cognitive individuals. Right now, you might be listening to a little bit of what I'm saying, but some of you might be doing another thing while you're still listening. Others, and maybe in fact, we're cognitive beings, right? Nothing wrong with that. We have processing going on all the time. Many things. The cognitive world, computationally, well, it's beautiful because we can do research. One of the things about cognitive is that it's not just the input is actually known, it's aggressively known to get mechanisms. For instance, IBM Watson, I'm not here to talk about IBM cloud or storage solutions, but I will refer to them on a couple instances as references to some of the points we're making. But IBM Watson, it's learning from patient diagnosis and analysis, but it's also going and reading constantly thousands and tens of thousands of pages every day, maybe every hour, of medical journals coming out. There's no doctor that can go and do that. But there's this input, and cloud and the cloud is a great place to have cognitive solutions emerge. It also we have IBM and other vendors start to provide actual cloud cognitive solutions on the cloud and cognitive services. So very good platform on which cognitive solutions are being built. It also gives you that interconnectivity needed on cognitive solutions as well. So hybrid cloud is really the platform that this new age of cognitive computing is emerging. And data is at the heart of it all, of these cognitive solutions, and really at the heart of our businesses. Data is what drives successful businesses. And so, and it's at the heart, as I said, of major businesses and cognitive solutions. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to take a data perspective to how you're approaching the cloud. So, to cloud or not to cloud? That is the question for many companies. I do a lot of cloud and data and storage consulting over the last 5 or 10 or X years, in addition to some other jobs. But the question, I see that question, to cloud or not to cloud? Well, I think we're past that, really, right? And especially those of us here at this expo, that's really not the question anymore, because cloud has tremendous value in many aspects. Not just, it started out with provisioning of infrastructure, and that's still fantastic. But now cloud's evolved, right? So there's services in the cloud, all kinds of stuff, and the vendors you're talking to today, and the solutions you're seeing, it's just phenomenal. It's just growing. So the cloud's emerging. So it's really not whether to cloud or not to cloud, but really how can you effectively leverage the cloud? And this is an area I see customers struggle with quite a bit. And sometimes I see everything from customers being told, or clients being told, organizations being told by their executives, hey, we're going cloud. Cloud's our strategy. Well, that's fine as long as you're doing it carefully, and I would propose that you do it with a data perspective. So let's talk about that. What do I mean by how to effectively leverage the cloud from a data perspective? Really, it's about bringing enterprise data discipline to your cloud activities. And I'm going to go through a couple points here. First of all, make sure that your cloud discussions, your cloud planning is incorporated into a larger data strategy. We'll talk about what that means. We're going to talk, these are sort of the main points I want to make in my remaining time together with you. So I'll have a chart or two on each of these, so we'll come back to this. Another point I want to make is about your existing infrastructure and your emerging infrastructure and how you can transform that, whether it's your block, file, or object, how you can transform that for the cloud and to help you more effectively leverage the cloud. Another point I really want to get across is this concept that I like to call global data mobility. Okay, we'll talk about that, what that is, and maybe some suggestions on how you can do that. Also, one of the biggest ways, or the biggest uses of cloud in general is for just storing data out there. And that's been sort of an emerging thing that's happened, one of the first use cases used by many companies for various purposes, but just storing data in the cloud, whether it's pictures, whether it's DR data, backup data. How do you optimize that activity in particular? So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then very, very critical, enterprise data discipline, I use that term. A lot of it's coming around to securing and protecting your data. Okay, I think it was Nicole mentioned that the facilities in the cloud by most of the vendors have really evolved to the point that there's some good solutions to help protect and secure your data as you leverage the cloud. But you have to make sure that you're using those services effectively, okay? And we'll come back to that point. And then how do you gain insights from your data, okay? And we'll talk about that. So we'll go through each of these points really quickly and maybe give you some thoughts on how you can more effectively leverage the cloud. And again, from a data perspective, we'll just touch on some of these points. So first point was about ensuring that your cloud planning are part of a larger data strategy. Data, as we've sort of referred to already, and there's probably different categories of importance. So you have critical data, you have important data, you have less important data, and then maybe repeatable or non-essential data that can expire very quickly. But you have to understand, or at least give some thinking to what data has what role in your business. Not just now, but a data strategy is, how can I leverage this data? Usually people are in a panicked reaction mode to their data challenges. How can I turn that around, be more proactive, and use my data? Okay, and that gives you a different perspective on your data. So what data is in your environment? How important is it? Who needs that data? Okay, individuals, groups, maybe you have to share it across outside of your organization, maybe across a community of research or healthcare environments. Where is that data needed? Is it just on premise? As part of that goes along with the who. Does it need to be delivered up into a public cloud? Does it need to be delivered, across a global sharing capability? And then how do you secure? I think there was a good question up front here at the end about securing your data. How do you secure that data? That's always, I'm not gonna give you any magic here. There's a lot of that's a very big topic, but you have to be thinking about that, especially as you go into a cloud environment. Now remember, I said that cloud is fantastic. It's got great resources for you to extend your businesses and bring you new opportunities. But remember that your data is your data. I've actually seen some attitudes or perceived some attitudes as I've consulted with customers where they're hey, I'm going to use the cloud so everything's good, right? Everything's wonderful and everything's free, right? No, you got to remember you're responsible for your data and your company's data, all right? So another point I want to make in this area of data strategy is that data is evolving. Christopher Penn, has actually identified different categories of the data, how organizations leverage data. And really, it's evolving. So I like to position this more as just sort of reactive mode to data at the lower left-hand side, all the way up to a more proactive approach to not just trying to manage the flood of data and the growth of data, but actually change the way you do things so you start to leverage and drive data and drive results and drive new opportunities from your data. So we see weird things, like the largest retailers, the largest retailers that don't own any commodities. You see some of the largest car rental places that don't have any cars. It's a lot of disruption, and it all comes back from this data-driven. So as you have a data-driven view, you're starting to think of new ways to do your business, where you can go into places you've never been before, right? So that's sort of what I think of as this data is evolving, and those are some quick concepts on how you can have sort of a data strategy mentality as you look to leveraging the cloud. Okay, so let's talk. So next point, let's talk about some of the challenges of storage and data in a cloud environment. There's a lot of challenges. There always has been. Cloud brings some solutions to these challenges, but it also brings some new challenges in and of itself. So a lot of clients I talk to, I only have to ask them 2 questions. You have more data than you did last year or less? And the second question is, you have more IT budget to handle that data and that storage, or less than a year ago? And usually those are conflicting responses, right? You have more data, less money to cover it. And then the next question is, what are you going to do about that? Right? That's probably a lot of you are in that boat. Other challenges around storage and data are what I call data silos, storage silos, data silos, where you have inflexible infrastructure. Maybe your big databases are running, and they got, you highly tune that data and that storage, but boy, nobody else could get to that, especially a DevOps team that's developing in the cloud. So you have these silos typically, maybe silos of vendor storage all around. We see that quite a bit. How do you break that open? How do you transform your storage and data infrastructure and make it more flexible, more responsive to the cloud? Rate of business, underlying storage technologies, cloud technologies and services, and also the rate of change in your business, new opportunities, competition, etc. All these things are challenges. Underutilization is a classic problem. Vendor lock-in is a classic problem. And security, protection, and compliance you always have to be thinking about. So these are some of the major challenges. Does cloud solve these? Yeah, they could. It could help, but not necessarily. You could go and say, hey, I'm going to go to the cloud, and all of a sudden cloud gives me more flexibility, right? Maybe. But maybe you've just created a new data silo in your cloud. Or maybe you've gone to a cloud provider, and now your vendor lock-in is not with a storage provider vendor, now it's with a cloud provider. You've got to make sure you're thinking, what am I going to do with my data? How am I going to have the flexibility? And so the question comes up, with these challenges, how can I transform my data and storage infrastructure to leverage the cloud more effectively? And there's some things you can do there. Software-defined storage. If you haven't heard that concept, it's part of a larger software-defined infrastructure movement in the technology industry, in the IT industry. It's really around releasing your data from the constraints of underlying hardware. Boy, that sounds pretty familiar, right? Isn't that what we do in the cloud? Isn't that, in virtual server environments and virtual networking? Yeah, absolutely. But for some reason, it's not getting as much attention on storage. But it should be, because it goes back to this, being able to transform what you have. If you can virtualize that, make it, separate yourself from the restrictions and constraints of underlying hardware, and give you more flexibility to your storage and to your data, so you can start leveraging the cloud more effectively. And also realign with business opportunities. If your infrastructure can't respond to a new business opportunity, whereas your competitor is using cloud resources effectively from a data strategy perspective, and then all of a sudden they can leverage the cloud effectively, they're going to have an advantage over you. Okay, so you've got to transform your existing legacy storage so it's more responsive and part of your overall data strategy. Now, IDC defines software-defined storage with three major points they make. One is that they say it's a full suite of storage services, okay? Things that you're used to seeing on underlying storage arrays, replication, mirroring, thin provisioning, these kind of things. Also, they say, by their definition, it should be truly software-defined. A lot of the software-defined storage solutions in the industry today are still trying to get to that, heterogeneous support, and they usually end up requiring their own hardware. The third area of the IDC definition is around what they call broad support. Basically, it's heterogeneous support, so you can support pretty much anyone's stuff that's out there. So that's sort of the one of the better industry definitions of software-defined. IBM actually has a broader view of that, which includes data as a service, delivered through service catalogs, managed at service levels. But again, I want to emphasize the importance of storage virtualization. Being able to virtualize your legacy block storage, your NAS filers, your object storage is usually pretty flexible already. It's emerging technology that's fairly flexible. But virtualizing your legacy storage so you can be more responsive and have more collaboration. And that goes along with that concept of global data mobility. We'll come back to that in a moment. And then software-defined storage has got to help you revolutionize data economics. Now, not too many people in here, I imagine, are going to be buying a Sikorsky helicopter. No. Some of you may be looking at Tesla, though. But it's interesting to see the software-defined storage can help in the sense that there's a model here, in particular with IBM's version of software-defined, which is, if you go and buy these Tesla or Sikorsky helicopter, you're not buying a product. You actually buy more like a program, more like a solution. And if there's new updates, new parts, you automatically get those. And we sort of have that concept more of as a service in the cloud as well. But this is part of IBM's approach to software-defined storage. It's really not a product. It's more a solution that you can use, interchangeably use various parts of it. But again, we're not here to talk about that, but I just wanted to use that as a reference. The software-defined storage, my point is software-defined storage can help you transform your data and storage infrastructure. Now, let's come back to this point of global data mobility. I assert that global data mobility is essential to your success in the cloud. And what do I mean by global data mobility? Well, it's, like I said, virtualizing your on-premise storage. This is all part of the definition. Data lifecycle management, what I mean by this is that you don't really manually manage placement of data. You have some kind of policy lifecycle management of your data, including an extension into the cloud. So data lifecycle management has been around for many, many years. A lot of vendors do great stuff here in this area. Storage vendors, we all do it really good within their subsystems and maybe across subsystems. But now it also has to apply to the cloud, okay, as part of that lifecycle management. Also part of global data mobility is being able to deliver data to the cloud and to new cloud workloads. That's an important point. I think I have another chart on it. Other aspects of mobility in the cloud is tiering to cloud or migrating to cloud, again, based on policy automatically, so you're not saying, hey, I got to move my data out here at this time. It's done automatically based on policy. Data replication to the cloud, data sharing in the cloud. Okay, so all of these are aspects of global data mobility. Now, how can I add that kind of mobility to my data? Okay, and I would suggest that you might want to consider software-defined storage approaches can help in this area because it brings these kind of capabilities. Depending on the solution, it can do it for your legacy environment as well as your new workloads in the cloud. Okay, delivering production data to hybrid cloud workloads. This is very, very important. We just had a panel discussion on the importance of DevOps. One of the things we see in DevOps is definitely a leveraging of cloud resources, right? And cloud solutions for DevOps available from a number of companies. How do you get your data? Maybe you want to do DevOps but you need access to a production Oracle database. How do you get that access into your cloud? Because that's typically going to be an on-premise storage. Well, there's solutions like, in this case, I would refer to IBM's Spectrum copy data management, but there's some other solutions in the industry from other vendors that do copy data management. And what they do is they can take copies of production environments, production applications, and make those available to DevOps, test dev, automated disaster recovery, reporting applications, maybe some analytics as you analyze your business and your data. Okay, so again, this is typically in the industry called copy data management, but make sure if you're looking at this that it can give you the ability to deliver the copies of that those production applications into a cloud environment. Another area is global namespace for unstructured data, so sharing data across a global cloud environment, hybrid cloud environment. This particular diagram is from IBM Spectrum Scale. There are some other good ones in the industry from other vendors as well that do global name sharing, and now they've opened up into cloud environments. So this is all maturing pretty fast in this area. But that global sharing of data is also part of the definition of global data mobility. Okay, so how do I optimize? Another point is how do I optimize my cloud storage? According to IDC, and I believe Gartner as well, over the last 5-6 years, two of the primary use cases for all of cloud infrastructure and all cloud services have been basically storing the cloud for disaster recovery and backup and recovery, okay, and archiving. So those sort of crammed together. Those are still remain two of the top 3 or 4 use cases for all cloud. So the question becomes, how do I optimize that activity of storing data in the cloud? One of the points I want to make is that consider solutions that give you an on-premise option. This is very, very important. The cloud providers are starting to realize this. They're starting to provide it. A couple of them, IBM and I think a couple others. There's some good storage vendor solutions, not cloud providers, but storage, a vendor providing an object storage solution, and they typically do also an on-premise option. But the on-premise, again, gives you that global mobility and helps you optimize that hybrid cloud. You might also want to look for support for both open and de facto standards. De facto standard being an S3 is a typical one in this area of discussion, but there's also OpenStack Swift and other more open standards. Make sure you're thinking about encryption and data protection and security, both in flight as well as at rest, wherever it's resting, obviously in the cloud. Software-defined policies provide that flexibility and helps you avoid both vendor lock-in, but now we also have this concept of cloud provider lock-in. So you also want to make sure you're doing what's right and giving yourself, your business, the flexibility you need in leveraging available cloud services. And then look for emerging analytics based on cloud storage services. So IBM has a lot of this, and I know some other vendors are looking at this as well. Example here, IBM Cloud Object Storage provides some pretty good options here in terms of on-premise, in public cloud, seamlessly being able to access either. One of the good things about that I didn't mention about this on-premise concept is that one of the problems when you put into the cloud, this is going to be a shock for all of you, but IBM and other cloud providers, we're really not trying to do this to lose money, and so we're trying to make money somehow out of this, right? I know this is a shock, but so we'll make it real cheap for you to put data into the cloud, but be careful about accessing it, right? Or moving it, or doing other things in it, because then all of a sudden you start getting some bills that weren't expected on your credit card, your business credit card. But if you have an on-premise option, all of a sudden you have flexibility to get that data, for most cases, on-premise without going into a public cloud. So that's one of the reasons I'm saying this helps optimize your use of cloud storage. Okay, let me move along real fast here. How do I protect? Data protection is another area absolutely essential as you're looking at leveraging the cloud. These are some of the standard design principles that are in the data protection market today. Easy to use, rapid recovery, application integration, being able to manage an underlying storage infrastructure, including cloud. All of these kinds of things are very important for cloud. Good news is pretty much all the backup vendors are doing a great job on all these design principles. Again, all these design principles are very important as you go to the cloud for data protection. Okay, and so one other point here on protecting your data in the cloud. Again, bring that enterprise data discipline to the cloud. And the first point here is designing flexible data protection solutions that allow you to manage your data protection, disaster recovery operations seamlessly, whether it's on-premise or in the public cloud. Make sure that that's pretty easy to transition between. Make sure that enterprise data discipline, make sure your service levels for your data are being met. Service levels for performance, resiliency, retention, etc. The cloud's very attractive for both offsite backups and DR requirements. Again, make sure your data is protected as you look from a data perspective, as you're leveraging the cloud for data protection or disaster recovery or archiving. Make sure you're doing all the right things there, and again, those facilities should be available both from IBM for data protection as well as other vendors. You might want to consider whether you're going to consume this as a service model. So there's great solutions available in the industry that leverage the cloud and as a service model for data protection and disaster recovery. One final point, data protection, we see copies of data being used for data protection, typically being the primary consumer of storage in an industry. Sometimes as much as 10 times the capacity of primary storage is used for retaining copies or replicated mirrors databases and other data applications, application data and business data. One of the things that's emerging very aggressively and very quickly is leveraging that data for other purposes. So no longer you just keep that data sitting around doing nothing. You go and start being a data-driven environment where you say, hey, let me go get some insights from those copies of data that I've been keeping for so long. Okay, so this is, IBM's doing this with IBM Spectrum Protect. Other data protection vendors are doing this as well, so good stuff for you. Okay, last point I want to make here in terms of the data management is, how do you get insights from your data? Edge devices are growing, data's growing. Data basically, in most enterprises today, starts to become almost virtually lost. Cloud can exacerbate that problem. You're just growing more cloud data out in the cloud. How do you get to it? How do you look into it? How do you get insights to it? Again, software-defined storage can help here. I don't have time to really go into the details here, but infrastructure analytics and operational analytics is something that's been happening for quite a bit of time in the storage and data protection market. One of the things that's emerging with IBM and some other vendors as well is cognitive business analytics, where you're starting to move up the stack of not just infrastructure, not just operational analytics, but actually seeing what's happening with data in terms of your business operations. And so this is something that's emerging very, very quickly, and you will see some of these solutions coming out, at least in IBM's software-defined, Spectrum software-defined storage portfolio. So one example here is IBM Spectrum Scale. These are actually two examples both using IBM Spectrum Scale. One of them also uses IBM Watson Healthcare. So there are healthcare solutions happening in the industry today that are just phenomenal. And it goes back to the example I used, where it's actually IBM and Watson are actually analyzing all the cancer activities happening, diagnosis, symptoms, treatments, results of those treatments, and that's being absorbed by Watson and being used to facilitate diagnosis of future cancer situations. And so how would you, if you have an unfortunate situation with yourself or a loved one, usually you want to go and get a second opinion, right? What if you could get the opinion of every cancer doctor that has ever lived, and every research that has been done, every patient that has had this situation, and what treatments were done, and how that was applied, and oh, by the way, compare that to genome research and how certain DNA characteristics respond to certain treatments. All of that is being done today with IBM Watson and Spectrum Scale. Also, we have something going on, Square Kilometre Array, largest radio telescope ever created in Australia and South Africa. This is creating more data than the entire internet, and it's being run behind the scenes, big data analytics with IBM Spectrum Scale. Okay, so let me finish up here. A couple years ago, I was sitting doing a discussion, cloud consulting with a customer, and we were talking about these principles of data and data discipline and enterprise data discipline as they move to their cloud activities. And two words came to me that I want to leave with you, and I want you to remember as you're engaging in your cloud planning. And those two words are cloud responsibly. Okay, so everything we've talked about comes back to that, cloud responsibly. What do I mean by that? Let's sort of review what we've talked about. Elevate your cloud planning to a data strategy discussion, and there's aspects of that we've discussed. Bring that enterprise data discipline to your company's evolution to the cloud. Okay, and what's that mean? Consider the accessibility of the data, the sharing of the data. Consider your performance service levels. Consider the total cost of ownership over time. So in some cases, cloud might not always be cheaper, especially as you look at it over a multi-year period. The security, obviously, the recoverability, and how you can give yourself and your business more flexibility in recovering. Will you be able to deliver your data when and where it's needed in a hybrid cloud model? Ensure your company is being your data is being adequately protected. We've talked about that several times. Ensure the data service levels are being met. We've talked about that. And then finally, architect flexible, mobile, global, or data mobile solutions as you leverage the cloud. And again, software-defined storage is a good step here because you can start getting that mobility, and then you're in a position when you are leveraging your data effectively, you're in a position to leverage the cloud more effectively. So I hope some of those thoughts will get you at least thinking about, as part of your cloud planning, start thinking about the importance of data and your data strategy. I'll be around for a little bit, so we don't have time for questions, but we'll wrap up. I did want to remind you that if you haven't already, you get.
So go forth and conquer, and the floor is open. There's lots of stuff going on today, as you know, at the show. And you can come back here at 1:40. At 1:40, we will have a presentation from Cloudistics about Steve Connor from Cloudistics about getting the benefits of a public cloud.